Hey there, I'm Vickie Howell, and welcome to episode number 2 of Craftish. This episode is sponsored by Brooklyn Craft Company, a studio for modern craft and DIY classes in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, offering workshops for today's maker, including sewing, dyeing, knitting, jewelry, art, paper crafts, and epic craft parties. For more information, visit them online at brooklyncraftcompany.com. So, I have a bit of a fabric problem. Even though I rarely have time to put any of it to use, I love fondling, collecting, and otherwise drooling over beautiful fabrics. So I'm pretty pleased as punch with today's episode. Our guest is Steven Fraser, the co-founder of the wildly popular fabric printing website, Spoonflower. I chatted with Steven from his home in North Carolina about everything from the intersection of craft and tech startups, the inspiration behind Steven's decision to start a fabric printing company, and his affinity for post-apocalyptic zombie tool. So, even though that day's stormy weather caused a few issues with our connection, it kind of affected the sound quality, the conversation itself is still pretty solid. And I love getting scoop from smart people about their creative businesses, and Steven gave me just that. Steven Fraser, thank you so much for being on Craftish. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to have you on this podcast. Well, one, because I'm a huge fan of your business, both the model and the actuality of it. But two, I was reading the introduction in your book, and something that you say at the end struck something in me, because it's also one of the reasons that I wanted to do this overall podcast in the first place. But let me step back and start by telling the story of, or mentioning the story. You say that there was a woman named Colleen who is a 70-year-old friend of your family, and something about her comment really struck you when you told her about your new business. And I was wondering if you would read not only her quote, but then what you say after that as sort of kind of your mission statement for the business, for that last paragraph in your intro.
Sure. She raised her eyebrows with astonishment when I explained our new business idea. That's amazing. You know, all my life I've wanted to design fabric. Really. When I lie in bed at night and I can't sleep, that's what I do. I design fabric in my mind. Colleen is not a designer or an illustrator. She doesn't have skill with a computer. She is a creative person, a person interested in self-expression and beauty and design and pattern. Many, many people share a passion for such expression. It's a thread that runs through many panels of their lives, perhaps showing up as cooking in one person, as gardening in the next. This book is about the joy of making something, mingled with the challenge of learning new things. Thanks for picking it up. I can't wait to see what you do with it.
I love that for so many reasons. One, because for me, I think creativity is interconnected, and the way you express yourself is the only difference between, and I think that goes for music, film, knitting, crochet, and even being a creative entrepreneur. I think there's great creativity in all of them. And I love that you strung that together. But I also love, my mom is around the same age as Colleen. And I always tell the story of one of the reasons that I do what I do and try to inspire people to become creative, and if they choose to make a living out of it, was that, my mom had, a master's in education, very well-educated woman, but she chose to be home with us for a while. And this was back in the day, and in the 80s, when clearly there's no internet or no cell phones or anything. And she wanted to make some extra money. And so she would walk door to door trying to sell pillows that she sewed. And there's a lot of humiliation involved in that. There's a lot of rejection. You're making yourself extraordinarily vulnerable, and not to mention she had to scrape together pennies to buy the fabric and all of that good stuff. And I just think, what if she had lived now, or she's still living, but what if she had been at that point in her life now with, websites like your own that sort of like open up that world, and platforms like blogs to have a voice in, and Etsy. And I wondered if you could speak a little to why, I'm sure you've had so many people say wonderful things about your venture. Why Colleen's sticks out for you, and why you use that as sort of an inspirational jumping point to launch this book?
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me the most about Colleen was that she articulated, this desire that she had had in her mind for literally for years, an activity that she probably hadn't given much thought to, a mental activity of creating repeating patterns. And there was just something that was compelling to her about that. Um, I'm thinking of it all, it's a sort of a mental exercise, a slightly perhaps less mathematical and more visual version of a crossword puzzle, just
Mm-hmm.
something, some activity that engages the mind. And again, a particular kind of mind, a very creative, expressive, experimental mind. And that's, Colleen is that kind of person. All her life, she's been very creative. She's actually, she's about to turn 80 now, and she's finishing her first novel. So anyway, what struck me about that was that, Gart and I, Gart is my co-founder with whom I started Spoonflower, almost unwittingly had stumbled into this activity that was almost primal. It already existed in people's brains. There was just nowhere for it to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that so anyway, that's why I started with Colleen, and she really is kind of I think a stand-in for someone in your case, your mom, but we've all known these very creative people who were not, that wasn't their profession. I mean, they've engaged in this kind of experimentation all their lives with activities that altogether constitute a kind of creative self-expression, but they are not themselves artists or designers. They haven't explicitly been artists.
Right. And I think what's so fascinating and wonderful about the time that we're in right now is that because we have so much access to information, we also have access to almost a sense of permission given by just the ethos of creativity to be creative without having to be quote unquote good at it, whatever that means, or to be an official artist or whatever that means, or to even, be a professional, whatever that means, And I believe that Spoonflower has really sort of helped nurture that ethos. Was that your hope when you first founded it?
Um, it certainly was, and I'll tell you kind of where that came from. For me, I think probably as a younger person, I graduated from high school in 1988, so I was a sort of a pre-internet person in terms of when my personality was formed. And I think I probably was a bit of a snob. I was the kind of person who I didn't think more people needed to publish books. I thought fewer people needed to publish books. I was snooty in that way. I worked in a bookstore. If you can imagine the record shop from High Fidelity,
Right.
it was kind of a
Yeah.
bookstore equivalent.
That's so funny because I was just going to reference Say Anything. So we've got John Cusack on the on the general vibe.
Yeah. So that was kind of where my head was, when I was in my 20s, and around the time I started my 30s, which was really just after the first internet boom. I went to work for my first internet startup, and it was based here in North Carolina, near to Spoonflower, and it was called Lulu.com. And it was this is a company that was owned by someone else, a very creative entrepreneur named Bob Young. But actually, Gart, my Spoonflower co-founder, and I both worked there. And when we started Lulu in 2002, it wasn't clear what Lulu.com was actually going to be. But what it eventually wound up being was a platform for people to publish their own books. So it's the world's first kind of internet-based self-publishing platform where it was completely free to publish your
So
own
how do
book.
you feel about that? Because that's the polar opposite of what
Right. Right.
what you're.
Right. That was the opposite of kind of where the kind of person that I had been years before, and it really took me a bit to come around to this.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember talking to other sort of English major types, and they were absolutely more trying to explain this democratic publishing, technology-based publishing platform, which all seems very obvious now, but you got to remember this is before YouTube or anything else. So,
Of
still
course.
kind of a novel concept. And by the way, Blogger had just started, a couple of years before, so the whole concept of blogs was very young. And my non-technology sort of English major friends would nod and nod, and then they'd finally sort of something would go off in their mind, and they'd say, "You mean it's just self-publishing? It's just vanity publishing?" And so I began to develop kind of a whole argument against that way of looking at it, and it was distinct from vanity publishing in my mind because well, it didn't cost anything to publish a
Hmm.
book. So it wasn't preying on the sort of vanity and optimism of people who wanted to publish their own books. It was providing a neutral, uh, democratic platform where people could put content out there, and other people could either buy it or not buy it. If it was useful or not useful was really not a judgment that anyone could make. It was sort of an ecosystem that allowed useful content to come to the top. And of course, the similarity there between Lulu and Spoonflower was that when someone bought a copy, one was printed on demand, exactly
Right.
one copy of one book. So there was no minimum. And I began to really see not just the power of that, but the virtue of it. What you were in essence doing is kind of taking human judgment out of this process of deciding what could be published or what
What
could
had
be
value?
purchased, and you were simply putting technology at the service, the equal service of everyone. And I thought that was a really powerful idea. And of course, Bob Young, who owned Lulu.com, had prior to Lulu, he'd started a company called Red Hat, which was
Hmm.
open source software
Yep.
company. And so some of this was coming out of the open source movement. And Lulu didn't try and own any of these books. They were all owned by the people who published them, and we were just the platform. And anyway, that idea really kind of changed my life and changed my thinking.
Did you
And
like the empowerment aspect of that?
absolutely, and I saw it firsthand in the community of people who kind of grew up around using Lulu.com, and whether it was people who had these niche subjects that they became masters of, or people who took their genealogical research and put that all online for other people to see. All these really powerful examples were there for me, and so I left Lulu. I guess it was 2006, and kind of messed around with being a consultant for other internet startups, and the yeah, my wife during this time was becoming more and more into sewing, and buying a lot of fabric
Yeah.
online and blogging about it, and I was
So
really
she
interested.
blogged. At that point, she was a blogger.
She was, yeah. And this is sort of in the 2007 time, and this great website Etsy had just come on the scene, and I was really fascinated by that. And so it was during that time when, one night after the kids went to bed, Kim said, it'd be really cool is if there was some place where I could design my own fabric. Like I have a picture in my mind,
Right.
and if I could explain it to someone or draw it on a piece of paper, uh, and they could print it, it would be perfect. And I thought, that's pretty much exactly what we did at Lulu. And that relies on this, something called digital manufacturing technology, which, one example is on-demand book printing, another example is 3D printing,
Hmm.
another example is textiles for us. But I thought, well, there's got to be something like that for textiles, but
Does
I had no
Spoon?
idea.
Sorry. Does Spoonflower offer the design consultation or design services? So I just heard you say, I wish I could just explain it. Because I
Yeah.
know a lot of people, and look, I have a few hidden designs on your site where I was just trying to turn. I'm primarily a knit and crochet wear designer, and I've tried to turn some of my, you know, knitwear designs into fabric, and then it's not laying right or whatever, or the lighting's wrong or whatever. And so I'm wondering if, because there is a little bit of a learning curve, and you had a workshop with Denise Schmidt, who's an amazing quilter, to teach how to design fabric, and you're really giving people the tools. But I'm wondering if there's also the other aspect where you could, for a fee, say, here's a couple of swipes, which are just like tears from a magazine, and here's kind of a really rough sketch of what I'm thinking. And then it could be a collaboration in that way as well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, and I think there are a lot of sort of people who do that on a service, fee for service basis. It's not really a technology business,
right? And that's where your interest is.
Yeah, that's what Garda and I knew how to do. We felt very confident, even though we didn't know anything about design or fabric or printing. Actually, at the beginning. We felt very comfortable building a technology business where it was a tool, and that we had to focus on. So that's the way Spoonflower evolved. And of course, many of the people who use Spoonflower, the designers, formally or informally, offer that kind of design consulting. And eventually we ended up writing our book, to try and provide a little bit of that introduction to people who are not coming from a technical design background, so they can create stuff using photos from their digital camera, for example, or a scanner.
And I love that there's a balance. I'm flipping through the book right now. I love that there's a balance of, obviously there's a balance of projects between, wallpaper, wrapping paper, fabric, all the things that your platform enables people to do. But for me, Spoonflower really is a crossover between, it really hits the sort of like artisanal world, like that whole demographic. I don't even want to call it a demographic, but we're sort of at this interesting point where technology and creativity sort of do this interesting dance together. And your book really encaptures that in a way, I think, because there is the very formal sort of, tutorials of how you work with Photoshop or whatever, photo program you're working with. But then also you're creating these beautiful, tangible, sometimes old worldly, sometimes modern looking finished pieces. And that makes me think about, when we were kids, because I graduated in 92, so we're pretty close in class. I think about our job fairs and I think about like there would have never, if you think about creative jobs, like there were the kids that were in art class and they were going to art school. And then there were the business kids. And now I wonder, I have teenagers. I'm looking at a picture of your girls. You're going to have teenagers soon if that picture is recent.
Well, the oldest one is not in the picture. Yeah, she is 17. So
okay, so I'm wondering if companies like you are going to revolutionize the school job fair. I'm wondering now if kids realize that you can be creative and also be in STEM, also, be studying technology, and how expansive that's going to be for our overall collective.
I totally agree, and I think that really is kind of where the collective consciousness is at, and certainly in the U.S. and I'm sure not only here, but my youngest kid is 8, so she's in second grade, and the most popular activity for her and I think all her classmates is maker time, which they do once a week, and they bring in a lot of cardboard, but really. Plastic, anything, wires. They have, the other day they were working with little LED lights and batteries and learning how to, create a little circuit to light up the battery as part of, a piece of artwork that they were doing.
Is this at school?
It's at school, yeah. So they just spend like a couple of hours a week gathering stuff together and making things, and they're supposed to plan it and keep a notebook and all that stuff. but I see it all over. I just got back from kind of a vacation, and I spent it. This sort of reflects one of my interests, but I spent it touring artisan distilleries, which are kind of springing up in the wake of artisan microbreweries for beer.
What type? Whiskey, gin?
Whiskey, yeah, whiskey. And these are like the little manufacturing hubs, and they remind me of Spoonflower when we started. entrepreneurs who've scraped together money, picked out an abandoned building in an industrial area that
Yeah.
hasn't been used for years, and they're creating little manufacturing operations for, in their case, some whiskey. But, yeah, I mean, there's just all this entrepreneurial activity around making, but it's on kind of a different scale. It's really an artisanal scale.
Is that some place you see you starting a new business within that artisanal niche?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
That would be fantastic. You said I think it was an article for Mohawk Connects some years ago, that you see Spoonflower as a technology platform for creative people. Have you had any pushback on trying to marry the two terms?
On trying to marry technology with creativity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Especially even, I'm assuming that you're trying to raise money, for, like VC money or whatever. Just, I mean, so either yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I don't think we didn't get pushback on that when we started, and certainly when we started, we were pretty much desperate for money because neither Gart nor I started the business with much money. Which, by the way, we've kind of evolved beyond that, and we did, 7 years into the business, finally accept some money last summer.
That's a big deal. Congratulations.
Investment. Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, it was a huge vote of confidence for what we had built in the community and the business that had grown up around Spoonflower. So it's always very exciting when people that are smart, because you always ask yourself, like, am I really smart or am I a complete idiot for doing all this luck? And people who are such accomplished business people come and invest in the business. It's really exciting.
Well, you said in your book that that one of your investors was a relative of your ink supplier who gave you a personal loan. That just kind of blew my mind. I mean, that truly speaks to not only how people perceive you as a human being, but how your entire, plan, your structure, your company structure is viewed.
Yeah, right. We were scrimping together pennies, and at the beginning. But the one thing that we always had going for us, and I think the people who were paying attention could really see it, is there was all this excitement in the community of customers and potential customers. Spoonflower was this hot happening idea. We were getting emails and notes and posts from people saying, oh my God, I love what you're doing. It's so amazing. It's changed my life. And so, yeah, that was easy for people on the inside to see. But, if you were standing in front of a group of investors who didn't know anything about sewing and had never bought fabric in their lives, which is most of them,
right?
They'd say, "What are you? You're doing T-shirts, right?" No, we're not doing T-shirts. It's just fabric. It was kind of a hard sell, but on the inside, it was always really exciting.
Did you ever consider? You also mentioned you kind of sort of joked about how it would make more sense for the likes of a Tim Gunn to start Spoonflower rather than yourself, who has a background in technology and entrepreneurial development. Have you ever thought, or during this time when you were trying to raise or continue to raise capital, have you ever thought about doing some vanity lines to help? I mean, getting Tim Gunn to come on and do a small collection of fabric?
We have thought about that. I mean, I think that's a good idea. I think in a lot of ways, Spoonflower both benefited and was probably hampered by having two people like Gart and I running it for all those years and bootstrapping the business. So we were always kind of defaulted toward what we knew, and neither of us really knew what it was like to do these licensed agreements. I mean, the closest thing we ever did was, we would have periodically somebody who was pretty well known, like Heather Ross is a pretty well known designer, and early on she would put out some of her out of print designs on Spoonflower, and that was a huge deal for us. But now as Spoonflower, Spoonflower is really in the hands of professionals now. We have new marketing director and professional people working there who are bringing a lot of other experience. And I expect, you'll see all kinds of interesting stuff come out in the next year or two or three.
Do you consider yourself creative?
I hope so. If there was any doubt about that, I think we put it to rest in the way that we grew Spoonflower, because we had to be so very creative just to keep going from one day to the next. Learning how to, keep printers running. And, I was buying print heads on Alibaba before anybody in this country had heard of Alibaba.
Yeah.
And, taking them apart and hacking the pieces to put them into the printers just to try and keep them running. So there was an enormous amount of creativity and improvisation required to get through the early years of Spoonflower. Yeah. So I feel pretty good about that.
Well, and marketing requires, especially marketing today. Marketing's so different today than it ever was before, but it requires a lot of creativity.
It does. And of course, you could argue that really, the creativity, we were surrounded by creativity from day one because of the way people were using the platform. And that's really was the most powerful marketing engine, is that, these incredible examples of it was all customer driven. And, some of the most creative, talented people in the world. I would defy anyone to find a community of customers with a greater concentration of just sheer talent and awesomeness than the Spoonflower community.
Absolutely. You're very clever in the way that you send out your marketing emails, and they're always thematic. And I'm a total sucker for theme. And I'm just blown away at the sort of like rabbit hole that you can go down once you click in, which I'm sure is good job, by the way. You click in and you can dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and then you see like, oh, well, if I add squiggles to the search term, then where's that going to go? But that in and of itself, sort of as a customer, opens up a creative realm in your brain that wasn't there before too, because your mind expands by seeing other people's, this collective, their creativity there.
I think that's so important, that, and I think, in some ways what you're describing is what drives Pinterest as well.
Yeah.
So really, we tried to think about Spoonflower when we designed it, certainly when we designed our marketing and our emails and our contests. We really thought all the time about inspiration. Like, how do you our goal, our task is not to convert customers or get people to buy something for 15% off or whatever. It's really about, our goal is to inspire people and to get the wheels turning in their heads about things that they might want to do, things that they might want to sew, fabrics they might want to use when they redecorate this room or recover that piece of furniture, or things that they might want to design. And that was really always our goal. And that was, I think we succeeded in that. And you alluded to the themes. A big part of that, we did this almost from the first months of our existence, a weekly design contest that anyone could enter that had
those have been huge for you, or at least they look like it from the outside.
Yeah, it's a great tradition, and we never repeated a theme,
really?
Which became difficult, after 350 weeks or so.
Yeah.
My favorite recent theme was one we did for Halloween, which was post-apocalyptic toile.
That was a solid call on your part.
Yeah, that was really good. So, I don't know how the contest will evolve. At some point, everything evolves. But, it was a huge part of Spoonflower culture, and something that me in particular, we just had so much fun with.
I hope you have that as a tagline on your business card, like purveyor of post-apocalyptic toile.
Right.
Because honestly, that is the best one-liner that you can have as a businessman.
Yeah, I need to write that down so I get that printed. But sometimes, when I'm talking to people who don't really buy fabric or don't really understand the Spoonflower community, one of the sort of shorthand ways to describe it for them is the world's leading source of zombie fabric.
Really, what else do you need to say besides that? You could drop the mic and then back away slowly.
Yeah. Nobody else comes close.
It's interesting. Nobody else comes close, but really it's kind of surprising that you're, 7 years into your company, 7 years into your company now?
8 years now,
8 years into your company, and you really don't have much competition. You've got a Zazzle that you could technically get something printed up. It's not the same. You don't have any direct competition, it doesn't seem like.
Yeah, I mean, Spoonflower, especially in the last year, we are starting to see the competition heat up. And, as you say, some of it's kind of indirect. So it might be a similar product or not exactly the same product, although there are certainly people just doing fabric. But, you have people who are taking the same, some of they're courting the same designers and the same style of things. And so we've really seen an increase in competition, which I think people have kind of wanted to emulate what we were doing for a while, and which is, the sign of a good idea. I mean, imitation is certainly a form of flattery, but the same technology that allowed us to sort of expand and, we're confident, gave us enough confidence to take on outside investment this year. The technology is catching up.
Right. Do the women in your life, your 3 daughters or your wife, have any say over the aesthetics, or it doesn't just need to be the aesthetics, but the overall look, or even what product areas you tackle next?
Not really, although they are certainly always willing to offer opinions, and my daughters in particular lobby for, the obvious horses as themes, and projects, mermaid tales, for example, which is a project we did for the blog. And at the beginning, actually, Kim was our customer service department.
Is she out of that gig now? Was she able to get out of that?
With me, yeah,
That's a tough gig.
Yeah, after a few years, it was a very tough gig, especially since mostly she was stuck doing it, in those little downtimes between kids doing other stuff.
Sure.
So that was all it's kind of by necessity, because we at the beginning we didn't have employees at all.
Right.
So, but she was actually very good at it, and she did influence, decisions about, what kind of resources we needed to offer people, and, usability things. She was sort of a key conduit to, I say she was the customer service department. Gart was the engineering department. Fortunately, they sat across a plastic table from one another, a folding table.
Yeah.
And, so she was super influential, but she was, once we actually had money to hire people and we built up a staff, she was more than happy to leave that.
Does she still blog?
She doesn't blog. A lot of people wish she would. She makes hats now. That's her thing.
Oh,
She's
millinery? Oh, that's fascinating. Are they up anywhere for people to see?
Excuse me, not yet.
All right.
I think an Etsy shop is coming, but right now there's just a big room full of hats.
Is her name the same? Is her last name the same as yours?
Yes. Although I'm trying to remember what she was planning to call the Etsy shop.
Well, if she decides and comes back before we broadcast this, probably it'll be in April. We'll put a link to that store in the show notes.
Okay. Excellent.
That is the one of the few. That and tatting are probably the 2 crafty genres that I've never dabbled in, and I'm fascinated by it.
Really? Yeah, it is super fascinating. She's got the hat blocks all over the house. Some of them really old too.
Those are collector items. You have 3 kids. I also have 3 kids. I have 2 boys and a girl, and I just wanted to share something personal with you that. My middle son, who's 14 now, when he was 9, he was having seizures, and he had pediatric epilepsy, and he has fortunately grown out of the seizures, which is wonderful. But during that kind of dark time, one of the ways that I could get him out of sort of the funk that happens after seizures was to get him drawing. And it didn't even matter if it was any, good. It was just sort of it helps with their fine motor skills, and also just helped him sort of calm down. And we went through this period where he was drawing some ninjas. I had a a charity called Purple Stitch Project that made these purple ninjas for kids with seizure disorders for a while. And he was drawing them. And he drew some and we scanned them. And made fabric through Spoonflower
Oh, awesome.
of them. Yeah.
That's great.
And we got the fabric back and I made a pillow for him and he still has that pillow. But, and him getting to open up that package and see his work, he needed a triumph. And I really feel that that's something that your company lent. But what was really sort of like the kicker for me was that there was a personal note on it from whomever had packed it up, just said, great job, great job. This is so cute. And, so I could say to him, a professional design, I don't know what I said to him, but I said, look, you got Spoonflower's attention with your design. And I just think those personal stories, I think just judging by how we started this with the personal story of your friend Colleen, I'm hoping this will be another one that will keep you smiling and on your way.
Yeah, that is amazing. And actually it reminds me of something that I haven't said, because I talked about how amazing and creative our community of customers is, which is true. Our employees are also creative, amazing people. And they're not unrelated, because we hire people who love Spoonflower already. So we've hired so many people who already knew about Spoonflower and were customers or designers themselves. And it's just such a passionate group of people, and they're themselves artists in their spare time, and entrepreneurs, and Etsy sellers and designers. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them. And
do you nurture that as part of your culture?
We do. We try. We have a green what we call the greenhouse, which is a room at Spoonflower that's devoted to sewing classes and and just times when people can come together and sew things and make things. We sometimes they'll get together and make things for charities. It's open a few times a month. There's a calendar on the site, and people from outside Spoonflower can come in, and employees give them tours. But we do a lot of sort of free classes and talks and that kind of thing. But employees get free fabric.
Yeah, that's good stuff. That right there is a perk in and of itself.
So, and some of them, I'm thinking of one in particular. She's sort of her whole thing is art from stuff that gets recycled. So she does amazing things with like fabric scraps, and there's a fashion show devoted to reuse, like fashion made from stuff material that's been reused. That's here in Raleigh every year, and we sponsor that sort of thing. I think we make a real effort to try and build activities around those things, which is very much, again, it's sort of an overlap between what our employees are interested in and what they love to do, and what our customers also are interested in and love to do. Yeah.
Well, Steven, it has been so great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
I really enjoy your company. Are you coming to South by Southwest?
Not
Interactive?
Not this year. No, I've done it in the past. Is there something that you're participating in that?
Well, I live. By the time this airs, it will have already been over. But I live in Austin. But oddly enough, it wasn't until last year that I actually participated. My husband, one of his jobs is a film critic, so I was always on kid duty during South by. So last year we switched, and I was just blown away by what was in my own city this whole time. So I'm a mentor for the interactive part this year. So I'll be doing that. But it's such a great resource. I find that I'm still quoting from sessions that I sat in on last year.
Yeah, I have found it the couple of times that I've been to be hugely inspiring. And I didn't want to even go as a business thing. I just wanted to go and be a sponge.
Exactly.
And soak up all the really interesting people who are there. So have fun. I'm envious.
Thank you. Well, if you ever come back for one, please reach out. Be fun.
I will.
All right. Take care. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vickie. Take care.
Steven's best-selling book, The Spoonflower Handbook, a DIY guide to designing fabric, wallpaper, and gift wrap, is available in stores and online now. For more information, please check out this episode's show notes page at vickiehowell.com/craftish. Craftish is produced in Austin, Texas by me and mixed and edited by Dave Campbell. Thanks again to our sponsor, Brooklyn Craft Company. Whether you live on the East Coast and you want to attend one of their classes, or you simply want to be inspired by pretty pictures of crafty awesomeness, check out their website, brooklyncraftcompany.com. If you like what you're hearing on this podcast, don't forget to head over to iTunes to rate and review it. Doing so really helps us get more visibility, which means that more people can find us, so we really appreciate your help. If you're interested in any of my other projects, please check out my website, vickiehowell.com, or follow me pretty much everywhere on social media at Vickie Howell. Please tune in to episode number 3, our next episode, with my guest, New York Times best-selling author of Knitlandia, Clara Parks. Until next time, don't forget to make time to nurture, pursue, and otherwise just wallow in the glory of your craft, whatever that craft may be. I'll see you next time.